We will start right at 3 o'clock Eastern, so just give us a moment to let everyone log in. If you are sitting here and waiting for us to start, we would really appreciate if you could fill out our pre-event surveys. We use these surveys to inform future webinars, to help us come up with new topics, and to evaluate the quality of the webinars. So if you could please take some time to fill them out. There is a version on the left-hand side of the screen for patients and caregivers, and another version on the right-hand side of the screen for healthcare providers. Okay, in the interest of time, I am going to move forward, but Emma Townsend from our team is going to go ahead and share those links in the chat. So if you missed the QR codes, no problem. We'll make sure you have the links. So my name is Megan Donnelly. Thank you for joining our culinary medicine webinar today. We have an amazing panel, and I will introduce them momentarily, but just some housekeeping things before we get started. Um, the this webinar is available for live translation in Spanish and Portuguese. In order to access the translated version, you'll just need to click the globe icon in your Zoom on the bottom of the screen to get started. For healthcare providers who are looking to claim CEUs or CMEs, we do have this available for dietitians and physicians. Um, we get these credits through Boston Children's Hospital, and so there is an account registration process. I have the link here. We will also be putting it in the chat shortly. But if you are going to be claiming CEUs or CMEs for this presentation, this is the process. This is probably a good slide to screenshot if you have questions about anything, but if you have registered before, this should be pretty simple. Exact same process as it's been in the past. You text the code P8BKE to the phone number on the screen. If you're a first-time user, you will need to register with Boston Children's Hospital in order to register your phone number with an account and text the code. So we will be showing this screen again at the end of the presentation. I will also make sure that you have the link in the chat to register for an account along with the instructions to make sure you claim your CEUs. Okay. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay. Okay, so thank you to proud sponsor Shar for supporting this presentation. We are grateful for their support. All right, and now finally getting into the topic, which is optimizing your health and well-being with the Mediterranean diet. So to introduce our speakers, we have our friends from Canada here today. Dr. Inez Pinto-Sanchez is a gastroenterologist and nutrition specialist, and she is also the director of the Adult Celiac Clinic at the gastroenterology division at McMaster University in Canada. Her research interests include the diagnosis and treatment of different GI conditions with a focus on celiac disease. And Jedid Jablam is a registered dietitian at McMaster Celiac Center. She also works in the inflammatory bowel diseases clinic, and she has over 10 years of work experience in community health care, where she's worked with a multicultural population. And 2.5 years ago, she was actually diagnosed with celiac disease herself, which has fueled her passion to find high-quality gluten-free foods and develop her own recipes. And then finally, we have Vanessa Weisbrod, who is the Chief of Community Engagement and Education at the Celiac Disease Foundation. She is also a medical chef and recipe expert who will be sharing some delicious recipes. I'm really excited for you to see. Vanessa has decades of experience working at pediatric hospitals, including Children's National Hospital and Boston Children's Hospital, and she also has written a few cookbooks, I think 4. So thank you to our panelists. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Pinto-Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Megan and Vanessa, for inviting us today. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. And let me just share my screen. And then I will put this into presentation mode. Can you see my screen?
Yep, it looks good.
Yeah, excellent. So these are my disclosures. And the idea for today is to review benefits and the potential drawbacks of adopting a gluten-free diet. And this is key, because when we, as a physicians, when we prescribe a diet, sometimes we don't look into all these other issues related to a dietary prescription. And also from a patient perspective, when someone adopts a diet, you need to know all these drawbacks as well to be able to address them properly. I want to also, at the end of the session, that were able to examine most of these metabolic complications that are linked to gluten-free diet or nutritionally inadequate gluten-free diet, and which include the risk of developing metabolic syndrome or fatty liver. And I would also like to all the audiences to learn how these dietary changes through a Mediterranean gluten-free diet can help achieving nutritional or healthy nutritional goals. I think we all agree, and there is no question, that the gluten-free diet is beneficial in celiac disease. In fact, it's the only available treatment. And a very strict gluten-free diet helps, achieving disease control, healing the gut, as you will see there, those villi that are in the small bowel that are usually short when the celiac is active. They usually grow back to even to normal stage, depending on how strict the diet is and how much exposure to gluten is. But a strict gluten-free diet allows for gut healing and also to reduce complications related to long-term active celiac disease. So there is no questions on the benefit. However, there are some drawbacks of adopting a restrictive diet. We all know how expensive it is to be gluten-free, and is not always covered. Gluten-free, different than medications, is not covered or supported by many healthcare systems, including ours in Canada. And this will be particularly challenging for people who are facing food insecurity and they're not able to afford food. You can imagine if they're not able to afford like a regular, like a minimal food, it's almost impossible to afford a gluten-free food without support. Additionally, alterations in quality of life. Some people, when it's not, it's quite challenging to make drastic changes in dietary and social life. And there are also some nutritionally imbalances, because of course it's a restrictive diet. And those nutritional imbalances can lead to further symptoms or even some development of new conditions. And we're going to focus today our talk on this specific aspect on nutritional imbalances and metabolic disease in patients with celiac disease. So when we're talking about nutritional imbalance, we're talking about alterations or imbalances of different nutrients. And nutrients in food are classified in macronutrients. Those are the proteins, carbs, fats. And within those carbs, there are carbs that are not absorbed and they are going to the colon and digested by the bacteria. That's called fiber. And then within micronutrients, we have vitamins, minerals, and organic acids. So there are these balances or alterations in the balance of macronutrients and micronutrients. From macronutrients, is very well known. There are multiple publications showing that, in general, of course, a gluten-free diet is not one single diet, right? So everyone's diet is different and depends on the food selection. But in general, those food records and studies that have been conducted have shown that a gluten-free diet relying in gluten-free processed food mostly is high in saturated fats and lipids and in simple carbohydrates, and lower in some healthy micronutrients, for example, fiber and proteins. In fact, one of the recent studies published have shown that, in general, gluten-free flours and bread are higher in fat and less reduced in fiber. Of course, there is a wide range of variety in different breads, but and the healthier composition is shown in pseudo cereals and legumes flours. A preliminary analysis of patients in our clinic that completed food records, 140 patients, we were able to see that in general, patients were reporting to eat much lower fiber than the recommended, so below the threshold. 80% of patients were getting fiber below the threshold. And what is interesting is that also the fiber consumption changes. You know that recommendations are dependent on if someone is female, male, whether is someone is depending on their age. And so the people with trends to get overweight or obesity, they were even eating less fiber than those who have normal BMI or have a lower BMI, which is interesting because we saw an association of fiber with BMI. And I'm going to talk about this later. And what could happen if someone doesn't have enough fiber in the diet? Well, within other things, low fiber in diet is associated with constipation. So someone that didn't have constipation when they started gluten-free, they may turn into constipation and they have a new symptom that they didn't have before. So something to consider. Those are the micronutrients that I just exposed. And what about micronutrients? Micronutrients are, as I said, minerals, vitamins. And this is an area that we have been working with Jadid a lot for the last, I would say, 5-7 years. In fact, several years ago, we published this study. We analyzed the micronutrient deficiencies in 221 patients with celiac disease and without celiac disease. So we analyzed their gluten-free diet, micronutrients, and what we were observing is that micronutrient deficiencies affected 65% of patients on a gluten-free diet. What was very interesting is that patients with celiac disease and without celiac disease who were adopting gluten-free diet, they have the same rates of micronutrient deficiencies, which suggested that some micronutrient deficiencies in the long term are not related to the disease itself, but more related to the diet. And we also just published a systematic review meta-analysis, which is pulling all the evidence available micronutrients and seeing that these results are confirmed by many, many other investigators around the world. And what's the problem of this? So one of these micronutrient deficiencies can lead to new symptoms. But another thing that we are seeing in nutritional adequacy in the diet is related to the changes in nutritional status of celiac patients. What I mean about nutritional status? Well, when we ask about how a celiac patient will look like, there is a misconception related to when the celiac disease was discovered that patients with celiac disease will be undernourished, right? So undernourished means that much lower weight than what it is considered normal. This is a misconception because more recently in the last decades, I will say, we were seeing a shift in the clinical presentation of celiac disease, and only 7%, less than 10% of people are undernourished. The majority of people have normal weight, and there is a 50% of cases that they are overweight or obesity. Even we are diagnosing celiac disease in patients who are undergoing surgery for bariatric surgery, so with morbid obesity. So there is this misconception, there is a shift in nutritional status. But what is more interesting than this, that's at the moment of diagnosis. What is more interesting is after patients start adopting a gluten-free diet, if someone has a normal weight, 16% of patients, 1 out of 5 patients, 1 out of 6, they will become overweight or obese. And some of them that were already overweight, they become obese. And that happens 1 in 5 patients, which is a lot. And this is not seen only by us, it's seen by many other researchers in the world that have brought this into attention. And because of this, we start paying more attention in our nutritional status associated to the gluten-free diet. And why, you may ask me, why someone will gain weight after gluten-free diet? It's not that gluten-free diet is for weight loss, right? So there is a misconception that gluten-free diet is, a good diet for weight loss, which we are not seeing that. So there are many reasons why someone with celiac disease may gain weight on a gluten-free diet. The first one is there may be an energy imbalance. What I mean about that is that when someone takes more or ingests more, like with food, through food, that what they burn, the body burns, then there is a positive gaining of calories, right? So if you ingest more calories and then you burn less, then those positive or those remaining will get stored. So then when you get stored, then you get weight gain. So to gain weight, we need more calories than what we burn. That second one is genetic predisposition to metabolic alterations that is involved in this complex metabolism of calories and nutrients. That's less frequent, and genetic does not explain only genetic does not explain weight gain. It needs to be accompanied by the energy imbalance, so then more calories ingested that the one burns. And then the third aspect is environmental health influence, which means that dietary choices like increased sugar, fat, low protein, and fiber may help to gain weight. Low physical activity, so burning less, may help to gain weight. And another very important aspect that nobody usually accounts for is that as the gut is healing, we are absorbing more. So even if we eat the same, when we are absorbing more, our body gets more energy, right? So then even if we eat exactly the same amount of calories, absorbing more gets more calories. Another aspect that could happen, also contribute for weight gain, is having some alterations in metabolism, some hormonal, like for example, thyroid dysfunction, hypothyroidism, PCOS. That's beyond my area of expertise for sure. So in terms of energy imbalance, let me just bring and provide these details, because this is something that we have been working on very intensively. So energy imbalance, how we determine how much our body needs and how much calories we get, right? So energy imbalance means that there should be higher caloric intake and lower energy expenditure. Energy expenditure means that how much the body burns, right? And how we can get more calories? Well, of course, if we get more calories in food, one muffin, it contains way more fat and sugar, it contains way more calories, right? So one bread, if it contains more fat and sugar, then it contains more calories. So of course, excessive fat and sugar in processed gluten-free can increase the calories that we are providing. And the second is, as I mentioned, if we absorb more, eating the same, we're getting more calories. So these two ways are contributing to higher calories intake on a gluten-free diet. And lower energy expenditure, it has to be related to, it's a little bit more complex than the prior, it's related to various factors. One is basal metabolism. Every individual burns different amount of calories, right? So based on our basal metabolism. And that accounts for 60% of the calories expenditure. How much the body burns, it depends on 60%, depends on basal metabolism. And that basal metabolism, I will get into there. There are factors that increase the metabolism and decreases. The second aspect is diet-induced thermogenesis. That means that how much calories we burn by digesting the food. That's another different. It's not the same amount of energy that we burn or calories that we burn digesting fat, digesting carbs, or digesting proteins. The proteins we usually burn more if we eat proteins. And then the third one is physical activity. The more physical activity we do, more calories we burn. So those three components are composing what we call total energy expenditure. So the total amount of energy that our body burns. Well, it's interesting. I'm going to give you a sneak peek here. Of course, this is not published, but we presented this in a conference. What we investigated in our clinic is the metabolism of the basal metabolism, which we can be measured by resting energy expenditure using a machine that I will show you moving forward. But what we investigated basal metabolism, and we were noting is that people with celiac disease have slower metabolism in general compared to someone else without. But on the top of this, if someone has overweight or is obese that has higher BMI, then the metabolism reduces further, right? So then it's more difficult to lose weight when the BMI increases. So that's very important to understand. And how we can increase our energy expenditure, right? So there are multiple ways to increase our energy expenditure. The first is increasing muscle mass, because all the energy is created in muscles, and most of the energy. Then we can increase protein intake, because as I mentioned before, this diet-induced thermogenesis is higher. We burn more calories by trying to digest proteins compared to carbs. Exposed to cold environment, of course, I'm not asking people to go there and get the polar bear wash, but it's exposed to cold environment also helps increasing caloric needs. And then definitely healthier is increasing physical activity. There are some medications that can affect metabolism, but we're not getting there. Staying hydrated is also important to increase metabolism, getting enough sleep, because that's the moment that we burn more and metabolize more is during sleep. And also managing stress, because chronic stress, even if you may think that stress may increase energy expenditure, chronic stress can affect hormones that regulate metabolism and may not help with weight loss. So then all these aspects we need to work on to prevent this metabolic disease. So as I mentioned before, coming back to my prior slide, with this shift in the presentation and this weight gain after gluten-free diet, we are facing increasing rates of obesity. And obesity is not now is not defined only based on BMI, because someone can have a lot of muscles and have a higher BMI, but that's not what defines obesity. Obesity is defined by accumulation of fat deposition. There are different fat deposition, central abdominal, that are more risky for cardiometabolic disease. So what we are concerned about obesity, there are people that are obese that are healthy, but then what we are concerned is that it could lead to complications related to metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease, and fatty liver. And this is an area that we have been working on, and is one of the topic of our webinar today, because it's related to Mediterranean diet. So metabolic syndrome, this is affecting 2% of celiac at diagnosis. Fatty liver affects 22% at diagnosis. And the metabolic fatty liver, the one that is associated to metabolic syndrome or diabetes, is 15% of the cases. What is interesting is in this study, after gluten-free diets, 2 years of gluten-free diets, the risk of metabolic syndrome, fatty liver, and the metabolic fatty liver increases and double than one than before, which is concerning. So metabolic syndrome, metabolic fatty liver are becoming a significant health burden, and this is possible reasons for this are related to the nutritional composition of packaged gluten-free foods. So this is clinically relevant because 10% of people who develop fatty liver may end up having further liver complications related to cirrhosis, which is advanced scary tissue affected the liver function. We don't want to get there. So we need to prevent this. And that's why we need to do an in-depth nutritional assessment and management of nutrition in our celiac population. So for this, as you will see the picture Jadid there, and also Mark Kaoli, which is a coordinator, has been working with a clinic that we have developed 4 years now. We have an in-depth nutrition assessment clinic that is supported by our Farm-Gone Nutrition Initiative. So in this clinic, what we do is very in-depth nutritional assessment. We do dietary assessment with food records, 3 days food records, ideally. We do calorimetry to measure these resting or basal metabolism. We do body composition to measure the amount of percentage of fat, proportion, and fat-free mass. And then we always invite our patients to participate in our registry so we can continue working in research and getting answers based on our population. So after this clinic, we put all together and we discuss with the team, and we create personalized recommendation based on this nutrition assessment. So we have our patients are very, very well characterized from a nutritional perspective. So what is interesting that we found in our clinic that after seeing more than 400 people and more than 300 enrolled in our registry, that 70% of them were referred for overweight and obesity. We were shocked about this because that clinic, when we developed the clinic, was not for overweight obesity initially. It was for undernutrition, problems with meeting nutritional needs, and then we are getting more and more increasing rates of overweight and obesity. And what we observe, as I mentioned before, is that the amount of energy or calories that we calculate, that we use to calculate without this previous assessment, is not accurate compared to measuring the energy by calorimetry. And we are seeing differences in metabolism and how people utilize the energy or the calories based on this. So it's very, very interesting data that we are analyzing. Another aspect that we are observing based on our clinic is that there is a significant amount of fatty liver, and people with celiac disease have higher rates of fatty liver compared with people without celiac disease, which is concerning. So because of this, we are working on promoting this Mediterranean style gluten-free diet, because there has been many studies out from celiac disease for people who have metabolic fatty liver that has confirmed that this is a healthy diet that improves fatty liver, improves and decreases risk of cardiovascular disease and metabolic syndrome. So this Mediterranean style gluten-free diet, I will not go in depth because Jadid will talk about a lot and specifically about the diet, but it's usually is based on healthy choices, healthy patterns that monounsaturated fats over saturated fats, and supports a better metabolic function. And it has proven clinical benefits. So there are, in celiac disease particularly, this just started, the evidence just started. So there are some studies, mostly in pediatrics. For example, this study Leonetti published a couple of years ago in 120 children with celiac disease and 100 controls. What they show is that there was no much adherence to Mediterranean diet. So there was no Mediterranean pattern within people adopting a gluten-free diet. So what is interesting also from this study is that 40% of people obtain the majority of the caloric needs from commercial gluten-free products rather than eating whole foods as suggested in the Mediterranean diet. So we're not saying that people shouldn't be eating, processed gluten-free. They should eat, but it's in the top. So the priority is whole foods, and then, of course, treats and less frequent and less the processed food. Other study from Spain found similar result in children. So there are very poor scores of Mediterranean style. So saying that people have more Western diet. Same findings from another study in Greece. What is this study added is that on the top of having low adherence, those who adhere to Mediterranean diet, they have fewer psychological symptoms. So that's important because we're seeing a benefit or an association with the potential benefit of the diet. Another study from Spain that was most recently published show that the patients that adhere to Mediterranean diet has performed better with bone mineral density. They have better outcomes in bone mineral density, so they have healthier bones. And also there is another potential benefit of mental health in people who adhere to the diet. And lastly, this study from Hungary in 156 adults with celiac and 63 non-celiac show that there is a very low adherence, and mostly to whole grain fiber, which is notably low in celiac, which we showed that before. So, and what is our experience with Mediterranean diet? So we are collecting this data. This student from undergrad student from our team, she has been recruiting patients starting in July. And from July until now, she recruited almost 100. So she offered 120, almost 100 patients recruited until now. And what is interesting is we are confirming the previous results seen in Italy, in Greece, and that only 14% of our patients achieve a score that is a minimal considered for a Mediterranean style. So the majority of our patients, 85% of people, they don't adhere to that at all, and they have a more Westernized diet. And we are seeing patterns is that the majority of our patients they report insufficient use of olive oils, and they are not getting enough fish or seafood. Those are the two main outcomes in addition to the fiber. So we are getting similar. So we are analyzing this data. We're still recruiting, analyzing this data. I'm expecting you will see results soon from this study. So what I'm bringing this is that gluten-free diet is not just eliminating gluten. We need to know how to read labels. Two products should be, could be very different in terms of we read the label. So it can be overwhelming. Sometimes reading labels, carbs, proteins, sodium, vitamins. So, but this is important to identify which of these products have less sugar and fat, as I mentioned, and they are more keen for this Mediterranean diet and healthier, right? And for that, we need dietitians. And because of this and all the complexity of the diet, we're expanding the role of the dietitian. And this is a study that we did a couple of years ago, and we presented that how we are seeing now that interaction with dietitian in our clinic is not just to assess gluten-free or education gluten-free, but it goes beyond that, including metabolic complications. So in summary, gluten-free diet is necessary in celiac disease, but poses some challenges and maybe nutrition inadequate. So we need to look into that. It's important to monitor nutrition and to consult with dietitian may help to achieve nutritional goals. And what we know is adopting a Mediterranean-style gluten-free diet may help improving symptoms and health outcomes in celiac disease. So this is very, very important. And the idea was to bring and explain why we're doing this. So a Mediterranean-style gluten-free diet is not just diet. It includes regular exercise and hydration. And I mentioned you why this is important. So I hope that this help clarifying. And of course, we continue collaborating with CDF and our societies to improve nutrition in our patients. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for that great overview of the benefits of the Mediterranean diet. Sorry, I think I'm on my next slide. Can everybody see the outline?
Yes.
So I'll start here. You're just missing the front page. But basically now we're going to look at how we can incorporate these Mediterranean diet components into our gluten-free diet, right? And we'll talk a little bit about barriers to adherence to the Mediterranean diet, because it's not easy to incorporate all of these components, and how you can do this more gradually and in a way that you enjoy it with yourself, your family. How to incorporate the components like gluten-free grains, having more fruits and vegetables, incorporating healthy oils, and also what foods to consume in moderation. We'll talk about a few recipes that I want to share with you, and then some take-home messages. Let's see, cannot move my slides for some reason. Let me just stop sharing and then I'll share again because it seems to be stuck. Okay. Good, I'll put it again in the presentation mode. Great. So here you can see the very first pyramid of the Mediterranean diet that was published in 1995. And you can see how different it is from what we have now as an updated version. So at the base, you can see it contains breads, pasta, rice, couscous, polenta, bulgur, grains, and potatoes. And then secondly, it goes into the fruits, vegetables, legumes, and nuts, olive oil as an important fat. And then also to be consumed are fermented dairy products. And then to be consumed more on a weekly basis is fish, poultry, eggs, and sweets. And at the top of the pyramid, you can see red meat. It also emphasizes physical activity and hydrating through fluids like water and infused beverages like herbal teas and those types of beverages. So now this is the updated pyramid. So this was created earlier this year by the Italian Society of Human Nutrition, and they revised the scientific evidence to see what is really necessary to maintain long-term health outcomes and how can we make the pyramid sustainable, right, in the benefit of our environment. And you can see at the base, we still have the importance of hydration, biodiversity, so choosing different kinds of plant foods, lots of variety because different colors and textures help to increase the nutrients that we consume. It needs to be sustainable, so trying to find foods that are more locally grown, reducing waste, and also consuming foods together with friends and family. Sharing your healthy food options together is very important, as well as exercise. And then for the foods, the base of the pyramid now contains mostly vegetables, fruits, and healthy oils. And they have moved the grains and the nuts and dairy up. So you can see they should be consumed in smaller quantities than the vegetables and fruits. And then we have fish and seafood, we have legumes, more processed dairy products. We have the potatoes more farther at the top now, and we have white meat. And then at the very top, the ultra-processed foods. This also aligns well with the Planetary Health Diet, which promotes, first of all, health and also the environment. There is no diet adherence tool for this pyramid yet, but when we look at some of the research that has been done by Chiriaco and colleagues, they published a review of 8 different questionnaires. They looked at the structure of these adherence tools, how they relate to health, and also how they're following Mediterranean diet recommendations. And they actually found most of the questionnaires did not accurately reflect the principles in terms of food groups and the frequency of consuming each of these, but they recommended the 15-item Pure MDS as the best option. So here you can see what the Pure MDS looks like. And I created a little evaluation tool out of this, which I use with my patients. So you can see in the third column, there's a screening. So you can actually fill this out today for yourself if you want to. So then if we look at the different food groups, we see vegetables are to be consumed ideally 6 servings per day. If you can reach that, it's not easy. You should be consuming at least 2 to 3 times a day vegetables to be able to achieve that. Fruits, 3 to 6 servings a day. Cereals, it also recommends 3 to 6 servings a day. If you have a lower caloric intake, then you stick to the lower quantities. And if you have a higher caloric intake, then you go with the higher amounts. A quarter cup of nuts and seeds, we should be consuming that 1 or 2 times a day. Dairy, 2 servings per day. Legumes, also at least twice a week, as well as fish and white meat. The red meat is, again, to be consumed in less frequency. And then eggs, 2 to 4 servings per week. Potatoes, not more than 3 times a week, but we'll talk about this later. And we have sweets and alcohol at the bottom. Olive oil should be the main fat, but we also have other options than that. This is again an overview of the different adherence to the Mediterranean diet in celiac patient studies. You can see none of them have been conducted in the North American population, so we definitely need more research in this. And if you look at the characteristics in the last column of the gluten-free diet versus the healthy control group, you can see there's a higher intake of potatoes, more red and processed meat, more processed snacks, also more sweets, more ultra-processed pasta and breads, bread alternatives. It's lower in whole grains and lower in fish and healthy oils. So we also found this in a study that we did among our own population of celiac patients that we see in our nutrition assessment clinic. This was a poster that I presented at a recent conference where we analyzed data from the celiac patients with fatty liver disease, and they recorded a 3-day food record. We analyzed this based on the Mediterranean Diet Score Screener, and as you can see in the right-hand side here, that olive oil was very poorly consumed, as well as vegetables, fruits, legumes, and there was a higher intake of commercially baked sweets. So there's lots of room for improvement, and we hope that anybody who faces these challenges can see a dietitian. And then some barriers that we found was that cultural preferences definitely make it difficult for some people to adopt a Mediterranean style diet. If you're used to eating different types of grains or different types of oils, we can look and see if we can find alternatives for those that are similar in nutrient composition. Financial constraints are definitely also a barrier because the gluten-free diet itself is already expensive. And so if we want to add extra seafood or fish or olive oil, then it makes it more difficult. There's also limited access to fresh quality foods for some people. So trying to find some alternatives to that could be maybe purchasing frozen foods or canned options. And food preparation skills seem to be a barrier now, especially in youth. We see something that's called de-skilling of their food preparation skills, and we hope that we can transfer our own skills to our own siblings so that they can learn to cook for themselves later on. Sometimes it's more convenient to purchase these processed foods, and so if we can find some time in the week that works best for us, it's good to plan ahead and to cook in larger batches. To improve food access, these are some tips. So if you can buy foods in season from local farmers markets, maybe even joining a food co-op, having your own garden. Looking at sales flyers, there's an app that's called Flip where you can also search for foods and see what the cost is in different shops. You can use points cards, coupons. Celiac Canada recently sent us a coupon for bread so that we could get a discount. We also need to compare food prices is very important. So not only finding the gluten-free foods that are suitable for the diet, but also, looking at the cost of each of these items. So if you look on this salad dressing comparison, you can see this seems to be the lower cost item. But if you look at how much it costs per ounce, actually this salad dressing number 2 is the lower cost item. Buying larger packaging sometimes is more cost effective, but you need to do the math. Sometimes it's not true. Buying online, if you can't find foods in your local store. I know I cannot buy almond flour or buckwheat flour or sorghum flour in my local grocery store, so I have to order this online. And actually this weekend was a really good time to purchase because there's lots of sales going on. Also participating in community food programs, or if you can invite other people, friends or so over to cook together with you, then you can also transfer your own gluten-free cooking skills, right? And then they can, in the future, cook some foods for you as well. So how can we incorporate healthy fats? You can see on the picture different sources of healthy fats. It's recommended that we eat 1 to 2 servings of nuts, seeds, and olives per day. And the Mediterranean diet recommends extra virgin olive oil as the main fat. It's high in unsaturated fats, right? So plant sources are the best option. They help us also absorb fat-soluble vitamins. These healthy fats, they're part of all of our cell membranes, and they protect our nerve cells, improving the signaling. They're low in saturated trans fats, so they help to keep our blood vessels healthy. And the extra virgin olive oil is the recommended Mediterranean oil because that's what is locally grown there. And it's also high in polyphenols. Bernardino, at the bottom you can see the reference, they actually looked at what amount of extra virgin olive oil do I need to consume in minimum amount to improve fatty liver disease, to improve liver enzymes, to reduce insulin resistance, and to improve high cholesterol levels. So we found that 2 to 3 tablespoons of these healthy oils per day is what is good to achieve the health benefit. Other unsaturated fats, you can see here in this table the composition of different fats. At the bottom, you can see olive oil. So we want more of the yellow and the blue types of fat because those are unsaturated and they help reduce metabolic risk. But then you can see at the top, there's also some other plant oils that are actually very high in saturated fat. So those we should consume in smaller amounts. And some other good options, alternatives for extra virgin olive oil would be avocado oil or canola, peanut oil, sesame, corn, soybean, safflower oil. And then, of course, nuts and seeds or nut butters, olives, and avocado. And then these are some examples of how you can incorporate these types of fats into different meals. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but if you can take a picture, then you get some new ideas for how you can incorporate healthy options. For fruits and vegetables, it's important that we eat at least one serving per meal, and we can also incorporate them in our snacks, at least 2 servings of vegetables per main meal. And they are naturally gluten-free, so this makes it easy. A variety of colors and textures gives different nutrient composition. And then we have also different cooking techniques we can use to make it more interesting. These are also options for our different meals and snacks. So you can blend it into a smoothie. You can mix your breakfast porridge with riced cauliflower, for example. And then for the gluten-free whole grains and legumes, we need 1 to 2 servings per meal and at least 2 servings of legumes per week. There are lots of different options for gluten-free grains. So there's amaranth, buckwheat, corn, millet, gluten-free oats, quinoa, rice, sorghum, and teff. You may not be familiar with all of these, but if you can maybe try to incorporate 1 new whole grain, if you're not eating much whole grains, then that would be a really good goal. So there's lots of nutrients in these grains. And we know that the refined gluten-free grain products are often not fortified, so they're lacking in iron and B vitamins. One option is to try legume-based pasta. So there's chickpea pasta, bean pasta, and lentil pasta that will definitely increase the amount of protein and fiber in the diet. And if you are buying dried legumes, it's important to sort them because sometimes they may contain traces of wheat. These are instructions for how you can cook different gluten-free grains. So you need to make sure that you're adding the right amount of water, and then there's different cooking times. Ann Lee is a dietitian, and she analyzed the composition of gluten-free meals, of food diaries of celiac patients, and she found that often they contain rice as a grain. So she also then looked at what does it change if we substitute these meals with whole grains. So based on that, we can see that the nutrient composition improves. And if you need to save some time, then you could maybe try a pressure cooker or slow cooker, just so that you don't have to be too long in the kitchen. This is a comparison of the composition of rice, white rice and brown rice, versus different kinds of legumes. So you can see over here black beans, navy beans, chickpeas, whole lentils, and split peas. So they have much more protein, more fiber, more iron, more zinc. So lots of different benefits incorporating those. Again, these are some options how you can incorporate whole grains into your diet. I always encourage my patients to do their own baking to improve the composition of the breads. And look, even you can make some puffed sorghum. This is a salad that's made with quinoa or with amaranth or millet. Lots of options. Then there's also different animal protein foods that we need to incorporate to achieve our protein goals. 2 servings of dairy is important for our bone health, and at least 2 servings of fish and seafood per week. So different options for the oily fish are salmon, sardine, mackerel, herring, trout, and tuna. And there are also some vegetarian options in case you don't want to eat any seafood or fish. You can take some supplements, but you also need to replace the protein and some of the vitamins and minerals. Now, eggs are an affordable option, and the Mediterranean diet recommends 2 to 4 eggs per week. There is, however, no evidence that in patients with celiac disease, even though there is a slightly higher cardiovascular disease risk, that would be linked to a higher egg consumption. So I wouldn't be too worried about eating too much eggs. Some important cooking tip is removing the visible fat from any of the meat before cooking. Always cooking on a clean surface and ensuring that any seasonings are gluten-free. So then foods to be consumed in moderation is the potatoes. This was recently researched by Harvard. And you can see they used information from the food consumed by people in the Nurses' Health Study and the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study. So many, many people, 205,000 people. And based on their diet, they found that the people with a higher intake of French fries, but not if they combined baked potato, boiled mashed potatoes, they actually had a higher risk of type 2 diabetes. However, if the potato was substituted with rice, white rice, then there was an increased risk. So it's important to think about what will you consume other than having potatoes, and what is that risk. One important thing is also to leave the skin on the potato so that you get more fiber, more iron, more B vitamins and vitamin C. We don't know about other tubers, how they affect health outcomes. Red meat has a high environmental burden. It's high in saturated fat often. Also has some heme iron that may be harmful, and there might be some other metabolites in the meat that could cause some health damage. Preservatives in the meats may be of a concern, and also the cooking method. So if you're charring your meat, there might be some carcinogenic compounds that are being formed. In terms of sweets, they recommend consuming less than 2 servings of commercial sweets per week. So because they're often high in saturated fat, salt, sugar, and additives if you're consuming gluten-free versions. So I highly recommend baking your own sweets. These are some recipes. So you can make a sheet pan where you chop up your vegetables bite size. You can put fish, or you can put chicken drumsticks and some legumes. This is the rice cauliflower oatmeal that I was talking about. This is also a recipe that I have developed for making some almond flour waffles. And then these are some bell peppers made with sorghum. Sorry, it's overlapping a little bit, but you can add different ingredients as a filler inside the bell peppers. So whatever ground meats that you like, or different vegetables and cheese. And then these are some resources. I really like this Pulses for a gluten-free diet book that has lots of recipes. So to conclude, the Mediterranean diet recommends eating mostly vegetables, fruits, and saturated oils, whole grains, nuts, seeds, and legumes. Choosing seasonal and locally grown foods prepared with different cooking techniques gives us lots of nutrition. And we want to make small changes based on using the adherence tool, if you can use that as a support. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. And with that, we will go ahead and switch to the cooking demonstration portion. Just give me 1 second to share my screen. Okay. So we are going to be sharing 2 recipes today. One is the lemon herb white bean and quinoa power bowl. This recipe is available on our website. Emma will be sharing the link in the chat shortly. The next recipe that we will be sharing is the Mediterranean baked cod with lemon, garlic, and asparagus. The link is at the QR code here. Emma will also be sharing that link on our website. And now I'll play the video.
Welcome to the kitchen. So today we're talking about Mediterranean diet cooking, but we're also going to talk about cooking to go to a party, because right after we film this cooking video, I'm actually headed to a neighborhood party. One of the things that is always stressful about going to parties when you're on a gluten-free diet is what to take that everybody is going to love, that keeps well when you're transporting it someplace, and is also, somewhat good for you. So tonight we're going to make recipes that fit the bill for all of these things. So first, if we can take a look at all of the ingredients that we're using tonight, we're going to be making first a Mediterranean cod with lemon and veggies. We have the fresh cod, we have lemons, we have mushrooms, asparagus, some red onions, some cherry tomatoes, some fresh garlic, and some seasonings. And then for our salad, our ingredients look really similar. We have red onions again, we have some tomatoes, we have cucumbers, we have white beans, and a beautiful fresh dressing. Now, what you'll notice about what's on this counter, with the exception of this bowl here of brown rice and quinoa, which I already steamed up, everything here is a fresh fruit, vegetable, or legume. And this is such an essential part of the Mediterranean diet. When we think about how we cook following the Mediterranean style, it's all about fresh ingredients and supplementing in a little bit of the whole grains, which for the gluten-free diet, we have brown rice and quinoa today. Everything on this counter, for the most part, is fresh, wholesome, and good for you. So we're going to start with our fish. And when we go to a dinner party, we often think of things that we can bake ahead of time, we can keep warm, or we can reheat. But something that we don't often think about is, can we actually use the oven at the host's house that we're going to? And yes, you absolutely can. I actually already texted my friend asking her to preheat the oven to 425. So when we get there, I'm going to pop the fish in the oven and cook it for 12 minutes so that it's fresh, hot out of the oven as soon as we get there. Now, this is one of the easiest dishes to prepare. We're simply going to put all of our veggies in the bottom of this pan. Our red onions, asparagus that I just went ahead and trimmed the ends off of and chopped into about 2-inch pieces. Our mushrooms, which are sliced shiitake mushrooms, but you can use any mushrooms that you like, whatever's in season, whatever your store has on sale, and some cherry tomatoes. If you want, you could slice these in half. I like keeping them whole. And we'll keep them a little bit firmer when they're cooking. So one of the things that you could do is you could actually roast the vegetables before putting the fish in. And so if you do that, it will make your vegetables a little bit softer and more tender. I really like still having a bit of a crunch in my veggies. And so I tend to not do that. And I'm actually going to cook it all together. So this is some olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil is a staple of Mediterranean diet cooking. It's used in almost everything. I pureed the olive oil with some fresh herbs. So there's oregano, there's some basil, and there's some thyme in this, just to give it some added flavor. With Mediterranean diet cooking, we like to get all of our flavor from herbs and spices as opposed to salt. You can use a little bit of salt, but it's not really going to be your main source of how you're going to get your flavor in all of the food. I'm going to top this with some chopped up garlic and sprinkle just a teensy bit of salt on, not too much. I'm going to place our cod fillets right on top of the veggies. If you're not taking, I cut these pieces up nice and small because I'm going to a dinner party, and so I wanted to have nice small pieces for people to take. But if you wanted, you could just put long pieces of fish right into the pan at home. Then I'm going to brush my cod fillets with just a little bit of this oil and herbs because it truly does add so much incredible flavor. You could put garlic in the oil and any herbs that you have on hand. It works better with dried herbs. I did put some fresh oregano in here today, but it will puree up a little bit easier and cleaner with dried herbs. But either way, it will work. This is just some sweet paprika and fresh chopped oregano. So we'll just sprinkle this on top. Now, again, we're not salting the fish. We're going to cook this with lemon slices on top and some extra fresh lemon slices on the side when it comes out of the oven. If you feel like it needs salt, you can always add it later, but I would encourage you to taste it before doing that because you really don't need much salt when you have this much herbs going on. All right, so we're going to arrange some lemon pieces on top of each slice of fish. Now this will go in the oven at 425 degrees for 12 minutes and it'll be ready to eat. So now we're going to put our salad together. I made the quinoa and the brown rice ahead of time because it takes a while to cook. And I also wanted it to cool down so that it's not too hot and it won't start to wilt my herbs and veggies. I cooked 1 cup of rice and 1 cup of quinoa with double the amount of water for it. And it took about a half an hour to cook. And then it's been sitting out for probably 45 minutes now. And it's finally just room temperature. And that's where you want it before you add in all of your veggies and ingredients. So I'm going to start by putting in some white beans. White beans are a great source of protein and fiber. One really good trick about white beans is that before you put them into your salad, rinse them. Put them into a strainer and rinse them in the sink. This is going to remove about 40% of the sodium that gets added in the storage of it in a can. So make sure you rinse these off before you put them into your salad, and you'll be saving yourself a whole bunch of sodium. And now it's just fresh veggies galore. We have some chopped cucumbers. And again, any fresh veggies you want, you can toss into this. Some red onion, some beautiful purple color, some chopped tomatoes, and then our fresh herbs. I happen to have some parsley and mint, so that's what I'm going to put in here today. It smells so good. Mint is just one of the most delicious herbs you can use. I'm actually not going to toss this yet. I'm going to leave it like this because it looks really pretty. And so I'm going to take it to our dinner party looking like this. But before I serve it, I'll toss it. Now we need some dressing. So in my cup here, we have the zest of 2 lemons plus the juice of 2 lemons. Lemon zest is an incredible ingredient because it's added flavor and it doesn't add acidity. So we love that bold lemon flavor, but sometimes people complain about lemon juice being so acidic. The zest won't add acidity to it, and so it's a great way to boost the lemon flavor without adding acidity to your dressing. Then I have extra virgin olive oil, some fresh oregano, and just a splash of honey to sweeten it up just a little bit. Again, no salt in this dressing. So we'll just go ahead and whisk it up until it emulsifies together. And again, I'm not going to dress the salad until we get to our dinner party so that it's fresh and everything goes on together right before serving. Now, how am I going to transport this? It's one of the questions that's always the hardest to deal with. It's simple. I'm going to put the dressing into a mason jar with a lid that closes so that it won't leak out. And then I'm going to cover both my salad and my fish with foil and take it on over to our neighbor's house for dinner. So we're going to go ahead and pop on next door and we'll show you the finished product right before we eat.
Okay.
Welcome to the
All
kitchen.
right.
So today
So,
we're talking about Mediterranean diet.
okay, so we are at the end of our presentation. If you could please take some time after this webinar to complete these post-event surveys. Again, there's one for patients and caregivers, and there's one for healthcare providers who are claiming CMEs or CEUs. The healthcare providers, especially if you're having trouble accessing your transcript with Boston Children's Hospital, you can, if you fill out this form, will have proof of your attendance. So please take the time to fill that out. They will also be in the chat. This is just, again, a reminder for people claiming CMEs and CEUs. I'm going to leave this up while I start to do some of the questions because we have so many questions and we're not going to have time for all of them because we're slightly over time, but I will just do a couple. So someone is asking if there is a place for gluten-free pasta in the Mediterranean diet. I've been very confused by this.
Yes, I can take that question. So again, it's part of the grains, right? So your pasta can be made of rice, it could be made of buckwheat, it could be made of quinoa. There's different compositions of different gluten-free pastas. And you don't have to consume all of your grains whole grain, so don't worry. We recommend in general 50% of your grains can be whole grain, but if you prefer the pastas that are more refined, sometimes they have a different texture that's more preferable, or maybe family members don't like the flavor of certain pastas. So it's up to you how you want to choose the 50% of more processed pastas versus the ones that are more whole grain or legume based.
And actually using gluten-free pastas is a really good way to get your family to tasting how other grains might taste. So for example, the chickpea pastas, Somebody may not like the taste of eating just a plain chickpea, but I started using the chickpea pastas for my kids, and they actually ask for it now as opposed to the regular pastas. And so, because it's in the shape of a pasta and it looks like a noodle, and it is a noodle, you can actually sort of sneak in the more nutrient dense grains and legumes into your diet without, eating it in its whole form. So I actually think that if you're skeptical about, quinoa or some of these other alternative grains, it's a great way to start the process of incorporating it.
Yeah, great. Thank you. This is a question I think everyone on the panel might have input on. Any breakfast ideas to add vegetables early in the day? I don't eat oats, and I know breads aren't a good go-to, but I'm stuck in a rut. Do we have any food ideas?
So there's so many options for breakfast. I mean, I tend to be a very big fan of gluten-free oats. It's a great way to get protein and fiber in your diet, and there's so many ways that you can make oats that kind of disguise them. But there's also things like grits, which are a corn alternative that you could use. I'm also a really big fan of cottage cheese with fresh fruit on it. We love having cottage cheese with blueberries and strawberries and kiwi in our household. So there's so many options. Dairy is a really important part of our diet, so that's another good way to get it in. Eggs, my kids love egg bites. You can bake them with any vegetables that you want. Major coffee shops all have egg bites now. They're kind of a trendy thing, but you can also make them in your own kitchen and really cut down on the oil and fat and preservatives that are put into them. Just simply, you could use just egg whites. You could use whole eggs, just whip them up, put mushrooms, spinach, cheese, anything that, you enjoy into them, and just bake them in the oven in a muffin tin. It's really easy to do at home.
Amazing. Thank you. And just one more quick question. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Out of season citrus is expensive. Do you have any other recommendations for substitutions in the recipe, Vanessa?
Sorry, you cut out for a second. What was the question?
I said citrus out of season is expensive. Do you have any other recommendations for substituting in the fish?
Citrus. So I would actually argue that citrus is fairly cheap. A lemon is a few cents, anywhere from 30 to 60 cents for a lemon, and it really does go a long way. But you can also, it doesn't have to be a lemon. Clementines are often cheaper, and you can buy them, for $3 for a 5 to 10 pound bag, especially at all of like the big box stores or places like Trader Joe's, Target. They're really inexpensive, and you could use a clementine as your acid in it. I know there was a question in the chat, wondering how do you really do this without salt? And I would really encourage you to try. Like, you really don't need a ton of added salt. You could use things like vinegar. There are dozens of vinegar. You just can't have malt vinegar, but all the other vinegars are gluten-free. So things like white wine vinegar, champagne vinegar, those will be more expensive than any piece of citrus fruit. And please don't all roll your eyes at me when I say this, but grow your own. We actually, last summer, we saved all of the seeds out of like some lemons that we put into iced tea. And we're actually growing a lemon tree in our window. We live in Massachusetts, and we started it in our window. And we're just about at the point where this coming spring we'll transplant it outside. And so it does take some time, but you can grow a citrus tree, pretty much anywhere in the country or the world. So another way to have it come forever in your backyard without having to buy them.
Yeah, that's very cool. Okay, we are unfortunately out of time. Thank you everyone for your time and for your questions. This webinar, along with other webinars we've done in the past, we've done, I think, 9 culinary medicine webinars at this point. They will all be posted at this link, which is the culinary medicine webinars page on our website. We have another slate of webinars coming in 2026 that will be posted very soon. So please follow us on social media, sign up for our email list, and you'll be informed about all of those amazing topics. And with that, thank you to the panelists, and we will see you another time.
Thank you very much, Megan and Vanessa, for invitation again, and it was a fantastic one.